Welcome to Behind the Book. It's time now for Behind the Book, hosted by Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion, two authors with a passion for books, no filters, and limitless curiosity. Join them now to find out the real story behind your favorite books and authors. And now, Behind the Book.
Welcome to another episode of Behind the Book. I'm here with my co-host, Karen McQuestion, and she has informed me that she has a productivity hack to share with us. So I'm going to let her take it over from here.
And I'm going to say it, and probably everyone listening to this will be like, yeah, that's really obvious. But it was not to me. See, I always had this routine. I write best in the morning. But taking a shower in the morning was problematic because Greg does not leave work at a specific time. So I was either waiting to see if he was going to wrap things up and get in the shower, or wondering if I got in the shower, if it would throw him off. So then I just started writing, not having showered, but I was in my pajamas and I just felt a little gross. And then the whole morning would get away from me and I'd shower later. So I've done this for a very long time. And then one day I thought, why don't I just shower at night? I know. Your mind is blown, isn't it, Tess?
Oh my God. I don't know if I'm going to be able to get through the rest of the day. This is so earth-shattering.
I know. I thought you might enjoy that. You can use that tip. You don't even have to credit me. You can just
Oh my God.
take it as your own.
So not what I thought you were going to say. That is hilarious.
Oh, man. So I've started to take a shower at night, and then I get up in the morning and I just, do my wash up and brush my teeth and throw on some clothes. And I'm like, wow, this is incredible. I can just start my day.
Oh, that is so awesome. Well, I have to say that strangely enough, I have also discovered this of late because I was always you get up for work and you shower. And then same thing, working from home, you're like the day just keeps getting longer and longer and you still haven't taken a shower and it's just, you're kind of disgusted with yourself. So yeah, showering at night does take care of that problem.
It does. And it kind of makes sense too, because you're climbing in between your sheets and you're clean, as opposed to the end of the day. The only problem for people that work out earlier in the day, that might be an issue. But
Yeah.
for me, that's not the case. So I've been so thrilled with myself because I'm like, wow, I get so much done by 10:30. This is amazing. So
Well, and it is one of these things that I don't quite understand. It's the same with when you go on a road trip. If you leave early in the morning, the day seems to go so much faster, even though the time is the same. I mean, it's still 8 hours or whatever it is, but it's the same with writing. If you get started right at 7 or something, you can have a whole day's worth of writing done by 10. And I don't understand it. It's the same amount of time if you did it in the afternoon. It's a phenomenon that is unclear to me.
I also started doing those sprints that you have talked about and other people have talked about that are so productive. But my issue with doing sprints with a group was that, I would write during the designated time and then someone in the group would call, time's up, and then they'd chat for 10 minutes and they'd jump back into writing. And the structure is perfect. But the act of hearing other people talk would pull me out of the story. And I remember I told you once that when the person said time's up, I had kind of forgotten. I was so in my project that I was like, oh my God, I jumped about 3 feet. And you did tell me, Karen, you can turn the volume down, which I thought was a very good tip.
But I have been scared many times too. Especially if you're in the zone, and then this voice comes up, you're like, oh.
So I have started doing it, but just, setting a 30-minute timer on YouTube and setting it so it's just a little ping, and then I'll write. And because after 30 minutes, 40 minutes, you probably should get up and walk around and move a little bit anyway. And then do something for 10 minutes and then go back to it. And that's been really helpful too, because I'm not tempted during that time period to check social media. I mean, the clock is ticking, or answer an email, or look up to see if a word means what I think it means. I just tag it and like, I'll get back
Yeah.
to that. I'm just moving
Yeah.
forward. So,
No,
um,
it's amazing how well that works. Like, and actually how much you can do in 30 minutes of total focus, or 45, or
mhm.
whatever, whatever your number is. Yeah, I'm always amazed when I really stick to it. I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm already done for the day, as opposed to dragging it out for 6 hours.
And you really can drag it out for 6 hours and
Oh
get no
yeah.
more done than you would from 7:30 to 10:30.
Yes,
So,
absolutely. All right. Well, we had a great guest on today. I think our listeners will really enjoy hearing this interview. And also from a fellow Midwesterner. She's from Iowa. So you guys got to bond over that.
we absolutely did. And her last name is Gudenkauf, which is a German name, although she said her family is very much Czechoslovakian, which
Yeah.
it's not even a country anymore. But her grandparents came from right from there, and she will never eat sauerkraut. You'll have to listen to the interview to hear why. But
Yeah.
she was a lot
Spoiler
of fun.
alert.
Yeah. Yes. Should
Yes,
I not
go
have
ahead.
said that? That was the
Oh,
key
no.
component of it.
I don't think it'll ruin anything. All right. Well, on with the show.
Today, we're excited to have Heather Gudenkauf with us. Heather is an Edward Award nominated New York Times and USA Today bestselling author of 9 novels. Her debut novel, The Weight of Silence, was an instant New York Times bestseller and remained on the list for 22 weeks. And if you know anything about the New York Times, 22 weeks is a phenomenal amount of time to be hanging in there. Gudenkauf's critically acclaimed novels have been published in over 20 countries and have been included in many best of lists in places like the New York Times, the Washington Post, and NPR. Her newest novel, The Overnight Guest, is a New York Times, USA Today, and Publishers Weekly bestseller. Heather lives with her family in Iowa. Welcome, Heather. We're so glad you're here.
I'm so happy to be here. Thank you, Tess and Karen. I'm so happy that you invited me.
Well, we love to start out the podcast by asking authors about their path to publication. Did you always want to be a novelist?
I didn't. Like many of us writers, I was a reader first. And so that's really where my love for writing came from. Although I always enjoyed writing, I was someone who always kept journals. But my path was always to be a teacher. And so that's the path I followed. And it wasn't until my kids were school age and I'd been teaching for several years that the writing bug really came after me. And I had the story to write and I really needed to get it down on paper. And so it was right before summer break. I got my classroom all closed up for the summer, bought a journal, and I started writing my first novel in longhand and finished a very rough, ugly draft that summer before I got my classroom ready for the coming school year, and tucked it away, pulled it out around the holidays again, and asked myself, what am I going to do with this? And I bought a book, The Writer's Market, and just started doing a little reading on publishing and the publishing world because I had no idea what it was about as a third grade teacher from Iowa. And I looked through the book, found a literary agency that represented the kind of books that I wanted to write, and some authors I admired. And I sent them the first 50 pages. And luckily enough, one of the agents there connected with the story and wanted to see the rest. We worked together then for another year and a half, and then it was ready to send out to publishers. And then, of course, that whole journey is one of it in itself. And, the rejection letters started coming in and that whole piece of the puzzle. And about a year and a half later, my first novel found a home.
That is phenomenal. You almost never hear that you
Yeah.
get an agent that quickly and that the first novel gets published and does so well. So,
Yeah, it was right place, right time.
well, it's a testament to your work. I mean,
Thank
that
you.
Absolutely.
phenomenal novel. Can I ask, you talked about journaling when you were younger. Do you still have those journals?
I do not. I grew up in a family. I'm the youngest of 6. And one of the ways my brother closest to me in age would torment me was to find my journal and read it to me while I locked myself in the bathroom to get away from him. And he knows I do this story all the time, so he's not going to be offended that I tell this story. So he would read it to me through the bathroom door, and I would be like, oh, and then I'd have to come out and try and commandeer it again. So no, I destroyed every single one of those journals. But I picked it up again when I was pregnant with my first child, and I did kind of a pregnancy journal, and then did that with each of my kids. So yeah, that's always been a good part of my life.
And I always think that that'll be such a gift for future generations. I mean, wouldn't you love it if your great grandmother had kept a journal of her everyday life and her pregnancies? And I mean,
Yeah, I plan to give it to them someday. But it's funny, and I can attest to this too, as being the youngest. As the more kids you have, the less products you have of their child. There's like
Yes.
0 pictures of me growing up, 0. And or maybe 1. And then so my first journal with my oldest, my son, is like practically full, the whole journal. The second one, a little bit less. And then my poor third daughter, she's like, I'll tell it to you orally. And
Yeah. Get a recording a device out. Yeah. If somebody's unfamiliar with your books, which one would you suggest they start with?
oh, that's always a tough one, because each book is, has a space, a place, the characters of their own. But I think if, to get a good sense of the kind of writer I am, my first book, The Way to Silence, is always a good place to start. I think that book really exemplifies me as a writer in the space that I write in and what I write about, which is, I write about smaller town Iowa, these very complicated characters where something, I write thrillers, so something tragic or scary happens in their life and their journey. And so I think that would be a good place to start. Although, all my books are set in Iowa. I write about regular everyday characters who are put in these unique situations.
well, that segues into what I was going to ask you next, which was, as someone from Wisconsin, I'm always delighted to read fiction set in the Midwest, and Iowa features so prominently in your books. My question was, why do you think Iowa works so well for stories of intrigue and suspense? But you answered that a little bit. Would you mind expanding on it?
Yeah. I grew up in Iowa. I was born in South Dakota, but grew up in Iowa, and it was such a great place, for me to grow up. Big family, running the streets of our town and exploring. People think of Iowa as a flyover state, which it is. You usually have a reason to come to Iowa, and usually it's to visit your great aunt Ruth or, or something. But it's really a beautiful state and very varied in its landscape. I lived in Dubuque, Iowa for a long time, and we have the Mississippi River there. We have bluffs, and it's gorgeous. And but we also have corn fields and soybean fields, which are beautiful on their own. And we have rolling hills, and we have woods, and we have caves too. And one of my books I wrote about a town set on a circuit of caves. So there's lots to mine there in Iowa. And I think when you take a smaller town, rural areas, these close-knit communities where everybody knows everybody, they've grown up together for years, and then there's a crime or something, nefarious happens, and it's just a gold mine for exploring that. At least it has been for me.
What does a writing day look like for you? Are you an outliner?
I am not. I say I write ugly. And what I mean by that is I have an idea. I have an idea of where a first story, usually it comes from something in the news. Then I, create some characters. I write a little synopsis. But whenever I've tried to write an outline, it never has worked for me. I just put all that time into it, and then my characters end up taking me in a completely different place anyway. And so I don't. I just sit down at my laptop and I start writing. And I do outline my characters ahead of time. I do have to say that. I get a notebook, and I tend to write most of my books are written from multiple perspectives, so from several different characters' points of view. So I'll get a notebook and tab the notebook's, character's name, and then really build their backstory in that notebook. And then I feel like I'm ready to start writing the story. So no, I'm not an outliner, and I just get everything out on the page. And, that's the really fun part for me, is just getting it all out there. And then I say the real work for me comes in the revision process, where I have to really dig in and make something of what I've gotten on the page.
So, at what point do you share a work in progress, and who are your first readers?
Yeah. So when I first started writing, I didn't share a whole lot. I was, I felt like I really didn't know what I was doing, and I didn't know where it was going to go. So I didn't share with really too many people. I did share with my sisters. They're usually my first readers, and my mom and dad often get early versions of my books. Nowadays, it's like I just sent it to one of my sisters. She's like, I want to read your new book, the one I just finished. And so I sent it to her, and I sent it to an early reader that I happened to meet through social media, who was a fan of the books and really seemed smart and had lots of insights. And for my last few books, I've sent her copies of it, and she's given me great feedback. So I have about 3 or 4 earlier readers, and I usually ask them to read for like suspense. Is it the pacing, any big holes, any questions they have about what I've written.
If you can find 3 or 4 readers that are really insightful, that's really a gift.
It is. And my sisters will think, oh, my sisters. And I, at first I was afraid they're just going to be too nice. But they really, because they're my sisters, and they're super supportive. But they really do give me good feedback on what works and what doesn't work and what questions they have.
Does the finished book usually match your initial vision of the story?
Hardly ever. Hardly ever. No, my books, like I mentioned, the characters really tend to take over and take the story often in many different directions. I do have a sense where I want the story to go, where I want it to end, but how it gets there tends to change a lot. And lots of times the main characters go through kind of a transformation on the page as well. So I've written books where I was sure that I knew who had done it, in the thriller world, the bad person who'd done it. And almost all the time that changes as I write the book. Somebody pokes their head up and is a little more evil than the other one, and just makes more sense to make them the perpetrator. I've started books where I've written, in several perspectives, and sometimes one of those characters just has to go. There's not the room in the book for that voice. And so, yeah, the stories have changed quite a bit as I write. It's always kind of fun to go back and look at old drafts and see, oh, yeah, wow, that was really different. And then for me, I get to know my characters in the story as I write. And I think we all do. But, it changes and evolves.
So then if you have a different villain in those cases, I'm guessing you have to go back and make tweaks to things that happen along the way.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of messy, like I said, messy and ugly, but I think in the long run, hopefully, makes it a stronger book.
Is there a book that you're dying to write but haven't just yet? I ask because we had interviewed another author who has been dying to write a ghost story, but said it's so different from anything she's written that she keeps setting it aside, the idea.
Yeah. Yeah. I love historical fiction. I love reading it. I think it would be so much fun to write something historical, but I'm a thriller writer, and I write, contemporary thrillers. So that too has kind of been on the sideline. And my folks. They've had, my mom and dad have had such interesting lives. And, I've always thought about writing a fictionalized version of their lives. And I think that would be really a fun thing to do, but it just hasn't been the right time in the, in the scheme of in my writing world, but maybe someday.
What would you be doing if you were not an author?
Well, I'm sure I'd be teaching. That's my second love too. I was lucky enough for a long time to be teaching and working in education and writing. And in the last year or so, I've stepped away from my education world and, really passionate about public education and, that whole world and teaching. And so I think I would probably find my way back there. Yeah, that will always have a special place for me.
Have you ever started a novel and then made the deliberate decision not to finish it?
No, but I probably should have. No, I mean, when I get in so deep, I'm like, darn it, I'm going to finish this no matter what. And it typically it ends up being okay after like massive overhauls. But it's hard for me to put something aside. I just have to wrestle with it until I get it into submission.
Do you have author friends? And if so, what role do they play in your life?
Yeah, I do. And it's, I've been writing, I guess now, for 12, 13 years now. And so I've been fortunate enough to, connect with fellow writers over the years. And, they don't, there's a small group of Iowa writers where, we see each other once in a while. And that's really nice to do. And we connect that way. But with my writers who live, far flung, we really work hard to try and stay connected through social media. I've done some really fun author interview series with other authors, which has been a lot of fun. Most recently, the Killer Author Club, where it's kind of like what you do, but where we interview authors. It's Kara Ruda and Kimberly Bell and we interview thriller writers about
fun
thrillers. And we call it the Killer Author Club. And we do that about every other week. And so that's been a really fun way to connect and keep in connection with fellow writers as well.
Do you keep a list of story ideas as you think of them?
I don't. I don't have a notebook. I have a lot of notebooks. And I found that they end up just being all over in the scraps of paper. And I end up losing them anyway. So I do have on my computer a list of premises that, I'll add to here and there. But usually I really dig into it when I'm ready to start a new project and I'll add to it then. But yeah, I'll tuck things in the back of my mind of that would be a great idea for a story. So I do have a running list that I revisit. There's been some story ideas that I run by my editor every time it's time for a new book. Can I please write this one? And for whatever reason, it may or may not work or be the time for that story. But yeah, I think we all do. We try and, always have our eye out for the next idea, the next story.
Is there a writing book you'd recommend for aspiring writers?
So many. I have a shelf of them. My favorite has got to be Bird by Bird by Anne Lamott. It's my favorite. I completely marked up and I read this all the time and I listen to the audio of it too. Oftentimes before I start a new project. And I also love Elements of Fiction by Walter Mosely. Mm-hmm. This is also a great one that I really enjoy. But I have a shelf full that I'll pull out when I'm looking at something specific. So I just turned in my newest novel. And so I know it'll be coming back with my editorial letter soon. So I've been reading some books on revision just to kind of prep myself for that.
Do you have any marketing tips for new authors?
Gosh, that's marketing's tough and you have to find what you're comfortable with. And, you do want to try and, try new things. And I'm up for just about anything for trying. But, the one thing I found to work the best is to try and build those authentic relationships with readers. And that can be hard to do on social media, but I really try. And so that might be, sharing some things beyond my actual book. So people see a lot of my dog on social media. And so I've made a lot of connections through Lolo and through my mom. Like I'll post a lot about my mom and dad. And, I have readers who ask after my mom and dad and, really become invested in this family, my family. And so I think the more authentic relationships you can have with readers, the better. So, I think oftentimes we feel so much pressure to have like millions of followers on social media. And I don't. But what I try to do is connect with the ones I do have and, get to know them as you can on social media. I mean, the best.
Do your parents mind that you talk about them?
No, they don't. They love it. they're really good sports, and I don't say anything negative.
Nothing
of
personal.
Course. No,
Yes.
nothing too personal. No. And if I were to, I'd ask first. But now my kids are like, they're like, one of them has zero social media. The other two have very little, and they're like hands off. They're like, don't post about me, don't talk about me. I'm like, I understand. Yeah, that's
I had this funny thing. I had a friend email me one day. This was a while back, and she said, "Is Ella okay? I haven't seen you say anything about her on Facebook forever." And I'm like, "Well, it's because she's 13 now, and she forbade me from ever speaking of her ever
Yeah.
again."
And my husband too is like not on social media at all. He's private, and we laugh about this. But I've had acquaintances say, "Are you still married?" I'm like, "Yes, of course." That's just he doesn't like to be in in the center of things. So it is
Yeah.
kind of
Funny.
because
That is
everybody has
hilarious.
such a different comfort level with social media, and it's such a big part of marketing these days, it feels like. And so, yeah.
Of the different platforms, what's your favorite way to connect with readers?
I feel like, and a lot of people hate Facebook, I feel like I get to know readers a little better on Facebook. I love Instagram just because I love that visual mode of it. I've not figured out Twitter. I try every once in a while. I dip my toe in and I'll post a few things. I don't really get it. And I'm not very good at that. I do have a TikTok account. I've tried a few TikToks. It's quite mortifying. So I don't know. It changes so fast. And I imagine that the next big thing will be coming soon and try and figure it out.
Now, I'm guessing that you have a regular writing schedule, but on those days when you're not feeling the muse, what do you do?
I go for hikes. I go for walks with my dog, Lolo. We spend a lot of time outdoors hiking. And for me, if I'm stuck, that really is my go-to way of getting unstuck. I just something about being outside and getting out from behind the computer. It just seems to loosen things up a little bit and things start rolling. I love to read, of course, spend time with family. Those are my big things. I lead a very exciting life. I walk, I read, and I write.
That sounds
And
very
spend time with
cool.
family.
Has anyone ever said something discouraging or negative to you about your writing? And if so, do you remember it and think about it every day like I do? No, I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I've had some pretty brutal reviews of books and work. And at the time, it was like, wow, they just really don't like this. And it hurts. It can be devastating. I think the longer I've done this, I do have a tougher skin, and I'm more likely to go, what wasn't for them. My books aren't for everyone. They're thrillers. They're kind of dark, and my books aren't for everyone. But I also think, that usually when someone's like cruel, I've learned that it's more about them than about me and my writing, and I try to keep that in mind.
Well, now switching over to a more positive note, what is the most gratifying thing about being an author?
Gosh, well, of course, when you see your book on the shelf at a bookstore and library. I mean, I was just such a huge fan of libraries, and that was my go-to place growing up. So seeing them on library shelves, that for sure is just huge. But also, getting a chance to connect with readers is really special because anytime you find your people, the book people, it's like, oh, I don't care if we talk about my book. Let's talk about books in general. And I really enjoy that a lot. So that's been super fun as well.
You mentioned your sisters read your books. What about your children or your husband? Do they read your work?
Okay, so I have three children. They're all grown now, and I started writing when my first book came out when my two oldest were in middle school, and I had one in elementary. So my middle daughter started reading them right away and offered great feedback. So yeah, she is. My oldest, my son, like never has read one of my books. He's more into at the time when he was younger, it was more Lord of the Rings, that kind of stuff. And now he's into finance, so he reads all that. And my youngest is like, she does not like scary stuff. And so she's like, I can't read it. I can't, it's too scary. And my husband always reads my books as well. So they cheer me on 100%.
How consumed are you with the story when you're in the middle of writing a book? Is it on your mind even when you're not working?
Yeah. I eat, breathe, sleep, the book. Yeah. It's when I'm in the thick of it, that's all I think about. The characters just really kind of take over. They become not real, but they do. They become real to you, and you're thinking, through plot points and sticky situations that they're in and how they're going to get out of it. And so, right now, I just turned in my 10th novel, and I'm still thinking about the characters, of course, because I'll have to revisit them. But it's hard. It's like you spend every day with them for so long. They become a part of your day-to-day life.
Is there something you wish people knew about being an author? Any misconceptions you'd like to clear up?
Oh gosh. People have been very kind, and I think that maybe it's not as glamorous. I mean, we sit and work in our pajamas, and and that's the bulk of what we do, and work, and try and make it better, and we read, and so it's so much behind the scenes.
I think too, sometimes readers see the pictures on social media and they're always of book signings or library events or author friends getting together for a
Yeah,
glass of wine, and it looks, very Kardashian, but it's actually not
right.
like that most of the time.
I agree. Yes. When we get out, we want to make the most of it, I guess. But and that's where you have to find the joy, though, too, is those behind the scenes. If you're not loving sitting behind your laptop for hours on end writing about other people's make believe lives, then you're not doing the. If you don't love it, you're not in the right profession.
My next question is, what are you working on now? And you just said you finished a book. Do you start another book right away, or do you wait till the revisions are done on the current one?
Yeah, I tend to wait. Although I do get that urge to start writing something again. I do wait. I can only really work on one thing at a time. That's just me. Although I'm thinking of ideas and trying to, narrow down some ideas for the next one. But I tend to just focus on one project at a time, and that works better for me.
It's hard to keep too many fictional worlds in your head at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
All right, well, we have fun extra questions at the
Okay.
end, so we'll just go through those and just whatever comes to mind. What is one food that will never get past your lips?
Okay, sauerkraut. And let me tell you why. So I come from a very Czech family, Czechoslovakian. My dad's, both sets of his grandparents came from the old country, from Czechoslovakia. So there was a lot of sauerkraut and dumplings in my childhood at my grandma's house. And the smell, I couldn't do it. I'd sit and cry. And my family still laughs about it now. But I've never had sauerkraut, and I never will, just based on that. I hear it's really good. I just can't do it.
Who would you want to play you in a movie?
Gosh, that is a hard one. Well, I'd be honored if anybody did, but I guess, we look nothing alike. But Kate Winslet, wouldn't that be awesome? I mean, she's
Oh,
such a good actress.
I love her.
everyone
Yeah.
loves her. Yep.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I would pick her.
What superpower would you pick given the opportunity?
Oh gosh. Well, I think it'd be really beneficial to be invisible as a writer, because you can kind of wiggle your way in anywhere unnoticed and get lots of good intel. I think I would do that. I'd be invisible.
I think most writers are nosy at heart.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that would be really
Yeah.
good.
I think so.
What's your biggest guilty pleasure?
My biggest guilty pleasure. Oh gosh, chocolate. I just love it. Day doesn't go by. Yeah, it's chocolate.
What's the worst job you've ever had?
This one's easy. I tasseled corn for a summer, and that is the hardest job, most physical, excruciating job ever. What you do, if you're not familiar, right? You pull the tassels off of corn, and sometimes you're walking, and sometimes you're on the slow moving machine, and you're pulling, and like your fingernails get bruised, you get sunburned, you get scraped up by the corn, bugs. It's really hard work. I did it for one summer. That was enough.
And did they pay you by the hour or by how much you did?
Not by how much we did. It was by the hour, I think, or by the summer even maybe. Like they might have said you get this much for
the season?
For the season. Yeah. It was hard work.
If you could instantly become an expert on something, what would it be?
Oh gosh. Home improvements. I am so bad at any of that. I mean, I just make it worse. If something's broken, I break it more. And my husband's really good at it, so I haven't had, to do a lot of that, but I just would like to be able to like fix something or, put something together. My mind doesn't really work that way.
What's your favorite smell?
I love flowers. I'd have to say, oh gosh, we used to live in a place, a home. We had a ton of lilies of the valley growing in our front yard, and it was just the best smell. Beautiful smell. I love that. Lilac trees. I love
now
flowers.
You're talking Midwestern sense to me.
Yeah.
What's the most terrifying thing you've ever done?
I went up in a hot air balloon a couple times, and it is terrifying. I think I'm not a fan of heights. Went up there, never feel the need to do it again. So happy to be back on the ground. It's beautiful when you're up there, but it is very unsettling when you just know there's a basket and a balloon above you, and that is it holding you up.
What's one thing you're really bad at?
Oh my goodness. I'm so bad at directions, and my family, I get lost so easily. Before GPS, I would be in back roads. It'd take me hours to get home from wherever I was going if it was unfamiliar to me. So bad at directions. I would love to be better at that.
I think you just have a little internal guider or something, because I have a sister, we can be somewhere we've never been before, and we'll get to a crossroads that's not marked, and she'll be like, I have a feeling it's that way. And I'm like, okay. And this was before GPS. And I'm like, how did you know? She goes, no, I just had a feeling. Like, I don't get those feelings.
I don't. And mine is like the opposite. If, whatever my intuition says, I should do the opposite.
Mm-hmm.
I'd be better off.
All right. And finally, if you could live your life over again, would you want to?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I've had a great life. That doesn't mean there isn't some really heartbreaking moments in it, but I grew up in a great family. I have a great family. I've been very fortunate doing things I love. I love my education career. I love my writing. I'm really fortunate, and I know it. And yes, I would absolutely pick this life all over again.
What a great ending to our podcast.
Yeah. This was so much fun.
Thank you, Heather, for giving us your time and answering all our many questions. You were a delightful guest.
Well, this was a lot of fun. Thank you so much, Karen and Tess. I appreciate it.
It was great to meet you. Best of luck. Next time you have a book, have to come on again.
I would love that. Thank you.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you for listening to Behind the Book, brought to you by authors Tess Thompson and Karen McQuestion. They hope you found it entertaining and informative. If you loved it, tell your friends. And if you have a moment, they'd love for you to post a star rating or review. This has been Behind the Book.